Hello, kindergartners. We are getting ready to start on our flower drawing. I hope that you enjoyed listening to the video about Georgia O'Keeffe, who was a famous American artist who loved to paint flowers. And so we are going to be painting our flowers in a similar style, drawing them and painting them really large to fill up our space, just like Georgia did. So you should have picked up a piece of paper like this from the school if you're going to participate in the fundraiser. If you are not going to participate in the fundraiser, but you are just creating your flower to satisfy one of your art assignments and you're going to submit it on Canvas, that is okay. If that's the case, then you are following along, but you're drawing on just a piece of copier paper or another piece of drawing paper, something similar to this, and that is perfectly fine. So, but for those of you that picked up your paper at school, it should look like this. I've already drawn the frame for you, and we do that because the Square One Art Company tells us that when they scan artwork, sometimes a little bit of the edge can get trimmed off or cropped off. So that just kind of protects the most important part of our drawing and painting, which will be right here in the middle, and that's the flower. So the first thing we're going to do is decorate our frame, and there are lots of ways that you can decorate it. I would encourage you to keep it simple using lines and shapes and patterns. So I'm going to start mine and just do some spirals here in the corner. And I am using an oil pastel. You guys should be using a crayon, a black crayon, or you could use a black permanent marker like a Sharpie. That will work best. Really, the black crayon will be the best thing for this project, for this step. If you have oil pastels and mom and dad are okay with you using those, that will work too. And if not, then a black Sharpie would work well. Okay. So I'm just gonna do that, and then maybe little wavy lines here. You could decorate your frame with polka dots, hearts, stars, something simple, some kind of simple pattern. And then I also want you to trace the frame that I made for you if you're using a crayon or an oil pastel, because when we start painting, if you are able to paint, if you have paint available to you, when we start painting, you will use, it will help you for the paint to be contained in one area if you've used crayon or oil pastel. It really helps to keep the paint in its place. Okay, so this was step one. We decorated our frame and we outlined our square. Okay, so the next step, we are going to draw a center of our flower. And since we're kind of just making this flower up in our heads, we're not really observing to draw, I want you to just make it a roundish shape. It doesn't have to be a perfect circle, just a sort of wobbly round shape will do. And then inside of it, if you could add some texture, I'm going to add bumpy texture, making some little small circles. You could draw rough texture with some lines if you want to, fuzzy texture with little lines, so that's up to you. And then we're going to start by making 4 petals. And I always find that it works better if I'm drawing up. Mine personally always looks better that way. So I start with my petals skinny here at the base, at the center. And then they go out as they come towards the edge of the frame. Almost like a little heart shape. So we're going to do that and then turn it, and then you're going to do the same thing again, up and out and around and back to the center. Turn it, same thing. They don't all have to look exactly the same. Petals often on the same flower, they're going to look very similar, but sometimes there are some little slight differences, so that's okay. All right, so I've made 4 petals. Now, if you look at it back in its right position, you might notice it looks a little empty here. So what I'd like for us to do is draw some petals that are underneath these that will be the top. So I'm going to turn it here and just make a wavy line that connects these 2 petals. And then I'm going to do the same thing in between all of these, so that by the time I'm done, my flower will really look nice and full. Lots of wavy lines on my artwork, I'm noticing. Okay, so now I'm finished with that. And I would recommend, if you are doing this for the Square One Art fundraiser, that you get a pen and you write your name, and parents, you might want to help with this. Write your name right in here before we start painting it. Okay, so I've got my Sharpie, and I just have to make a few comments real quick about the materials that you're using, because if you're submitting this for the fundraiser, then it is important which supplies you use. If you're going to be able to paint, because you have a little tray of watercolors or some other kind of paint at home, then I would suggest that you use crayon or oil pastel for this part, because the paint will, or the oil pastel or crayon will resist the paint, and that really helps with this project to keep the paint where you want it. If you don't have paint or you don't want to use paint, you could choose to do everything in crayon, coloring it in and drawing it and every part of it in crayon, or you could choose to do every part in marker. I wouldn't mix it up too much, because if you do part of it in crayon and part of it in marker, it can really mess up your markers and it might not show up very well. So the most important thing is to make sure that you don't leave lots of scratchy, empty white space. You get everything filled in. And if you have any questions, just message me about that and I will try to help out. If you're just doing this to fulfill your credit for the week for art, then you can just pick the materials that you want to use, and I'm fine with that. All right, so I'm going to put my name right here, Mrs. Helms, and then you guys at home, of course, you'll be writing your first name right there. If mom and dad want you to put the year, you could do that, and I'll just do a little 21. Okay, now we're going to paint to fill in the rest of it, and I want you to think of it in 4 parts. You've got the frame, so that's going to be one color, the background, the petals, and the center. So try to pick different colors for each part. And I happen to have 2 different size brushes, so I'm going to start with a small brush for the middle, and I'm going to really move my brush around in that paint, because this has not been used here at my house in a very long time. And once it starts flowing, I can tell, because I can see it on the brush. And then you'll notice that my oil pastel will really pop through that paint pretty easily, and hopefully your crayon will as well. Okay, and when I'm finished with that, I need to rinse my brush in the water. This is one of the things at school that we really focus on, is making sure you rinse and just gently wipe your brush on the side of the cup before you pick a new color. And I am going to go with orange for my petals, and you boys and girls at home can choose whatever colors you want. I would suggest that you not use black or brown for any parts of the flower. Okay, so the great thing about using your paint and your oil pastels and watercolors together is that if you get outside of that line, it will just pop right through. I just went back to get a little more water so it will move a bit more easily. And while you're working on this, you just want to focus on controlling your brush and filling in all of the space. Whenever your paint gets too light, you can see a big difference right here. You just want to go back and wet your brush and get more paint. Okay, and now we have 2 more sections to paint. So I'm going to do that on a time lapse for you so that you can see it kind of sped up a little bit. I have decided I'm going to use a nice cool blue for the background so my flower will really stand out. And this will be, for the frame, I'm going to use brown. But you guys can choose whatever colors you want. Just remember to make them different colors so that each part appears separated from the others. And if you have any questions, you can message me about that. Okay, guys, and that is all. Just no matter what medium you used, paint, markers, crayons, just take a look over it. Make sure that you don't see any empty white spaces. Make sure that it all looks really clear. One thing you can always do is take your oil pastel or crayon and go back over the lines if you feel like they got covered up a lot by the paint. And the same thing would apply to the other mediums. If you need for those black lines to stand out again, you can always trace back over them. And just make sure that all of this is still visible. If you're turning this in for your Square One Art fundraiser, then give it time to dry and then drop it back off at the school in the folder for your class. If you are not turning it in for the fundraiser, then just take a snapshot with your camera or your phone and send it to me on Canvas, and I will give you credit for completing that assignment. I hope that you guys had fun. Bye-bye.